Hi, I'm Steve Sink, also known as Pagan Zero. Welcome to Traplighting in Mandelbulber. You and I together are going to build a complete animation using nothing but stock settings and a copy of Mandelbulber 2.18. Won't you follow along with me, and together we'll make something kind of cool.
All right here, Mandelbulber, right from the default settings. We're using 2.18. The brand new release version. Anything later than that will work. Anything earlier than that will not do what we're going to do today. This is Mandelbulber, not Mandelbulb 3D, by the way. Mandelbulber. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to your view. We're going to go show toolbar like that. We're also going to turn on auto refresh, and the default Mandelbulb shows up. We're going to hit this Minger sponge right there. Enter sponge. Oh, sorry, we lost our auto refresh. I want to change image. First thing I want to do is I want to go to HD, and then I'm going to have it. So I got 960 by 540. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to go to effects down here at the bottom. I'm going to go to background at the side. I want to turn off the default 3-color gradient and attach this, or change the background to solid black. Like that. All right. Next, I want to go over here to Object. At the default, I should have the Fractal pane showing on the left. We have Minger Sponge because we added the Minger Sponge from the toolbar. I'm going to hit this second formula pane, which will automatically say, do we want to enable hybrid fractals? We're going to select yes, and in this second formula we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the main formula list, put on Vixsec, and see, we now have a Minger sponge and we have a Vixset. We have changed the default settings down here, image adjust to HD and then half of that. We have not changed any other effects other than the background we have changed to black. Let's go back to Objects, Vixsec. We are now ready to turn on the Traplights. Effect, lights over here. And at the bottom, we'll see fake lights based on orbit traps. We will select that on, and you will see that nothing happened except the whole fractal surface got light. Well, we're going to go through these one by one. First off, we're going to try to just get some visibility. And so I'm going to pull up my pane a little bit here so that I can get at my animation window. Click on keyframe animation. For more details about how to use keyframe animation, see my keyframing in Mandelbulber video. Back up here to view, I'm going to turn off show toolbar. We are done with that. We only needed that to generate our Minger sponge there at the beginning. We have now got our shape. We've turned on trap lights, yet we don't see any of those lights coming around in the back like we normally would. So what are we going to do about that? First, let's double the X orbit right here, and we'll come back to what these things do, but that'll give me just some faint shapes here around the end. We're going to change the shape. The default is point. We're going to change it to square, just so I can get a little bit more visibility. There we go on the lights. We're going to go down here to the rendering pane, and under the ray marching step multiplier, I'm going to start halving it until the lights firm up. I'm going to say at point 125 works good. I go one more and you'll see that they're pretty tight, but just for our demo purposes here and at low quality when we're just doing our just playing around. Later on, we're going to increase that to get better quality. So 0.125, let's go back to effects and light. All we've done is we've just merely changed this x-axis. Now, what have I changed? I'll explain each one of these parameters, that are under fake lights. Fake lights are also called orbit traps or trap lights. I prefer trap lights because it sounds really cool, much cooler, than fake lights. Let's talk about trap lights. First off, this we're not going to start at the top and work our way to the bottom. We're going to start in the middle and then bounce around a little bit, but it'll make sense. We would merely change the x-axis. Right now, the distance of these light shapes from the interior is controlled by the x, y, and z axis. We changed the default x-axis, which was 2. We changed it to 4. It brought them off of the surface a little bit and has them floating in the air so we can see them. I tell you what, we will go through these one by one from the top to the bottom. Starting this minimum iteration and maximum iteration. Minimum iteration 1 sets them basically, it's easier to show you than to tell you. If I go like that, it sets another whole level of lights that start at the 0 level rather than the 1 level. The default is 1. There's no 0.5. These are they're not contiguous. They're binary. They're either 0 or 1. You can go up to setting it 2, and then you're basically just turning the lights off except for the interior. So for our purposes, maximum iteration and minimum iteration, these determine how many shells, I like to look at it that way, of these lights there'll be. 1 is going to be our default. Like I said, if we took it to 0, excuse me, wrong way. If we took it to 0, we'd have another layer out here. I don't want to have that much light. I want to keep just a layer over my fractal. So we're going to keep this as 1, and we're not going to touch these again. One thing we are going to do before we get too far into each of these settings, we are going to start adding them to our keyframe here so that we don't get lost, so that we can always return to where we were before. So under this keyframe animation, you'll see that the camera settings are the only thing we have listed as default. I'm going to just add every single thing on this pane. I'm going to go from, except I'm not going to add minimum, maximum iteration. I'm going to go intensity of surface, add to keyframe, and all the way down. Visibility of glow, I'm going to add softness, I'm going to add the shape. If I right-clicking on here, I can go add to keyframe animation. Clicking on any one of these X, Y, or Z orbit trap center axes will add it. I'm going to add shape size and all the way rotation. And I'm going to right-click on this color and add that. There we go. Now we have added every single parameter of the fake lights other than the minimum and maximum iterations, which we're not going to use for this video. We have added that to the video. And we're going to add our first keyframe there so we can see what's going on there. Now, anytime we double click on this, it'll take us back to this default shape with all those parameters, which we've included every single parameter. So that'll take us back to here every single time, no matter where we change, no matter what we change. So we've got our shape, the lights in effect. We can start playing with these parameters. We'll look at intensity on surface. Now, intensity on surface does what it says. Right now, the default is 1, but as I start backing this off, you'll see that the outside lights don't change, but the amount of light that's coming off of the surface will change. I'm going to back that down to about 1/4. Visibility of glow, we change that, and then we can start brightening it up considerably. We're going to leave it right now, visibility and glow, on about a 2. We're going to the softness. Let's see, visibility of glow, as I said, changes the visibility or the brightness, I guess. Softness is how diffuse it is. Excuse me. As we sharpen them lights up, ooh, that's an interesting effect. It kind of negativized them. Anyway, I'm going to leave this on the default, and we're not going to touch much softness at the moment. Relative thickness, however, we will be playing with all over the place. As you see, as we thicken these lines up, it's often awful similar to brightening the visibility of the glow. We can keep this, I'm going to keep this at about a 1.5 for our purposes right now. We are going to play with the shape now here. This is probably going to be the funnest thing. I put it on square so that we could see, just because this is a Minger type hybrid shape, and so the square lights lend itself well to it. But our default is, of course, points, which you can see there's a point, orbit trap point, floating above each of the vertices, and I won't get into the whole science behind orbit traps because I frankly don't understand it myself. If you hold your cursor over here, it gives you basically it's a point defined in 3D space, and the brightness of the point is dependent on how close it is to the shape during chosen blah 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 blah. You can read about all that. The point is it makes a glowing point of light above the shape of the fractal, and as we change the shape of the fractal, those lights will change. So here's a point. It's been standard for Mandelbulber for several years. The brand new features, we now have line, circle, square, sphere, and cube. We'll look at line, which will send a ray of light out into bing, every single point along here. And one thing I forgot to mention is, one thing I forgot to do rather, is actually add thickness to our keyframe animation. So we're going to add it at 1.5. Back to our shapes here for the lights, we see we did point and line, and we'll see circle adds these little circular shapes. Circle, and we're going to skip ahead. We're going to skip square for a second. Circle, and then the 3D version of circle, sphere. That's a 3D shape. It's easier to see it with the square, and then the 3D version of the square, meaning the cube, looks like that. We're going to play strictly with the square today. Each one of these shapes can be used, but it's not contiguous when you go from one shape to another, meaning there's a clear break point where all the lights change from from line to circle. There's no halfway point between them. So when you use these in your keyframes, you need to remember or just be aware that the lights are going to change abruptly rather than gradually. Okay, we've talked about the shapes now. We're going to stick with, square here. And going down orbit trap center, it is the distance from the light from the edges of the shapes. We're going to leave our X at we're going to leave our X axis at 4. I'm going to add 2 to the Y. There we go, just to get a little bit of distance. Later on in part 2, we're going to talk about audio syncing this, but for now, we're going to leave the lights as close to the surface as we can, yet still leave them looking like a distinct light cage, I like to call it. So that's the orbit trap centers. We're going to leave those at 4 and 2 for right now on the X and Y, and leave Z alone. Shape size is only works when you have a shape, obviously. It changes the size of the light shape. Right here is the default 1. If I were to double that, you would see that at 2, we start morphing into each other in the light cage. Okay, here on the shape size, at 1, we see what it looks like now. If I were to back that to half, the shapes get smaller and smaller until they start approaching the points again. Let me go back to R to the default, and then when I double it, you'll see that it makes one solid light cage with little shapes in between it. And then if I go higher, I think 3 actually disappears altogether. Pretty much, yeah, the shapes are too big to be in the visible area. Probably if I zoomed out, you might be able to see them. Let's go back to the default of 1, and that is shape size. Shape rotation next is pretty cool. We're going to start changing the shape rotation and adding some keyframes and running some test animations, all to show you what rotation does. Because I can do rotation and I can show you, but what we're going to do a bunch of animations, and we're going to keep erasing our animations and doing animations. So shape rotation. Let's start by first adding 90 to the, let's get in the right, we're in the right X rotation, 90 degrees, and you say, well, nothing changed. Well, nothing changed because these are squares, and we rotated them 90 degrees on the X-axis, and so they look the same. If we go to the y-axis, however, you will see, boom, that is what rotation 0, and then that is the whole shape rotated 90 degrees under the y-axis. Now we have this as a keyframe, so let's go ahead and add keyframe of these lights rotated with the shapes on the y-axis at 90 degrees. We click on the first one, that's where we started from. Perhaps. We have not added shape. Sorry. My confusion. What else is not in here? Let's make sure we got them all there. Yeah, okay, my bad. So back over to here. Let's reset that and modify it. There we go. Now, were I to run a quick animation, let me just quickly set up a folder for my animation. I'm going to use demo trap. Actually, I've used that just a few minutes ago. Sorry. New folder, demo 2, or demos. And quickly, if we run the animation, you'll see that the lights is going to run over 100 frames, standard. That 100 frames per keyframe. We're going to go from the first 0 to the first, and you'll see these lights are changing over here in the pane, orbit trap center, shape rotation. You'll see that we're slowly increasing the Y rotation, and over 100 frames down here. What does this look like? Well, let's go show animation and take a look. And we can hit spacebar on our keyboard or this play button, and you'll see the lights. These are the square shape morphing under the y-axis. Pretty cool. Well, let's do a morph on the z-axis. What does that look like? Let's reset that. And we lost our auto refresh because we ran an animation. We'll put the auto refresh back on, and I'm going to add that as a keyframe. And look at the shapes. I'll do this using keyframes rather than playing around over here. With no rotation, that's the plain square traplights. There they are, rotated Y 90. Here it is, rotated Z 90. And then if I hit 1 and add keyframe, let me delete all those out. I could have kept the first 100 frames, actually. The lights, I should have kept the first 100 frames, actually, instead of deleting them all out. It will do a full loop. They will loop the 90 degrees under the Y, and then 90 degrees under the X, or the Z. Before I get too deep into this, we're going to continue to run this all the way through. I thought maybe I needed to have an extra keyframe somewhere, but frankly, it doesn't matter. We're going to run through all 300 keyframes, and I'll stop talking so that I can speed this up. Okay, let's see how our animation is now. One more time. All right, we're gonna go from rotating on the y-axis, rotating on the y-axis, the z-axis, and back to standard. There's a Z. There's back to no rotation, and we made a perfect loop. All right, so we have now got these lights to rotate in the Y and the Z axis and make some different shapes. Proof of principle there. Stop that. Let me delete out all these images. And we are now going to start doing some cool stuff. Okay, now we're going to play with this x-axis that we started in the beginning. Let's pull this up a little bit so we can see our thumbnails. Let's change down here. We can do this a couple ways. We can change it over here, or we can change it down in here. We want to change the main fake light orbits trap to 8. under this one, and you'll see that it looks like that. And so now when the lights they'll spin around like we set them to spin, and they'll also pull out and then pull back in and return to the beginning. We can run that out now, but let's also play with the line thickness that we changed. Let's go here to the second frame here, and this time let's play with it over here. Relative line thickness, let's change it to a 2. And since we ran our animation, we lost our auto fresh. So here we'll modify it. So now we're morphing the shape sizes. We're morphing the shape. Well, actually, we aren't morphing the shape size at this point, are we? We could do that too. Let's look down. We have 1 across the board here. So let's take a look. What does... Let's take a look what 2 might do here. Let's add 2. Versus 1. All right. And let's do one more thing. Let's also change the color. Let's go down here. We've got this keyframe already. Let's change the color here to a nice bright orange. Yeah, orange. And modify keyframe. Let's change this to a nice bright blue. And let's go ahead and run that out. Let's render that and see what we get. Now, I'm going to watch a little bit of this rendering because we're going to watch the light shapes. They're changing and they're morphing and they're turning. But they are also... And the problem with having too many variables change at once, we're also pulling away from the x-axis, so we're backing the lights up. We're also increasing the line thickness, and we're also changing the color. So we're changing a bunch of parameters at the same time here. More than we can comfortably figure out. Okay, so now the x-axis is pulling back in because we only had it set to go out on the frame 1. We should be approaching something like blue. And watch this transitional shape here because I already ran this earlier, and I know that we get a lovely shade of purple right through here, violeted purple. And then as we approach blue, our lights are still spinning around. Our shape is blue. It's pulled in more. And then also we'll see how the lights look with the y-axis over here at 90 degrees. It looks like the Y value for the trap center is changing as well. I had to look through all of our parameters. See Y. Yeah, we have a 0 to 2. And as we're pulling into the home stretch here, we have 25 more frames to get us back to a perfect loop. Here we go. Let's go ahead and show animation, embiggen that, and let her run. So now the lights spin around, our x-axis goes out, we turn yellow, we have the y-axis at 90 degrees, we hit blueness, we've gone in on the x-axis, and we're rotating back to the default into a perfect loop. So now we're starting to see some cool things happen. Look at that. Okay. We are now ready to start adding, well, basically we're ready to start morphing the shape itself and then adding a bunch of keyframes. We have 4 keyframes. What I'd like to do is take us up to 20 total, which would be a little bit over a minute. It'll be like it'll be 2,000 frames. And we're going to start doing that right now. Okay, one little thing I want to show you also is morphing a value across keyframes, or interpolating keyframes as well. I've got a 90 value on the Y and a value on the Z rotations. I can also put a value on the X, and it'll show up depending on where we are on the Y and the Z. But I want it to run across all the frames, and I want to do a full 360 from the start to finish. Well, I'm going to do that by leaving the first value on the X rotation as 0. I'm going to right-click it and go Interpolate Next Keyframes. It asks me the last keyframe number, which I'm going to scroll all the way up to the end, 3, and I want that last value to be 360. And you'll notice it makes the keyframes 120, 240, and 360. And that way, when I run this one more time, and we'll skip to the end here. Take a look at our rendering, and now we'll see that the lights are going to really be moving across the axes at all times, and we're getting some very interesting shapes. The X was moving 360 across, while the Y and the Z moved 90 and back. And just in that, by moving that X-axis across all the keyframes, we've really opened up the variety of those shapes in the movement. Okay. We are now ready to add a whole bunch more keyframes by morphing this shape. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go over here to Object. Remember, we have two formulas. We have a Minder sponge and we have a Vixic. Let's go over here to the Minder sponge. About the only parameter worth adding is going to be this Minder sponge scale. We're going to right-click on it and add it to keyframe animation. We're going to go over the Vixic, and we're going to add everything over pass from scale to ZX offset. So scale at 3, add keyframe animation. Any one of these limit axes will add all 3. The ZX scale, and then the ZX offset. All of those added to keyframe animation. Now we are ready to rock and roll. And there's one more parameter for each one of these fractals that I want to add, or which one of these formulas rather, and that's the weight up here. Each one, the default and the maximum is 1. We're going to add the weight for the Minder sponge and for the Vixic to the keyframe animation. The weight basically is how much of each one of the fractal formulas contributes to the final result. Okay, now we're ready to create keyframe 4. We're going to simply, let's get 3 active here, which is the same as 0. We're going to simply take the scale here and have it, turn auto refresh back on, and we got a shape. Add keyframe. Let me take that back. And let me change the limit of X here. Let me just double it to 2. That's our next shape. Add to keyframe. Let me double that X again. And that's our next shape. Add to keyframe. Let me double it again. And add to keyframe. Let me go back to keyframe 3 here. Add to keyframe. Let me scale double from 3 to 6. And we'll add that to the keyframe. Let me go back to my default of 3. Let's do a bunch of things this time. Let me change this. Let me double that to 8, where we've been already. But I'm going to take the Y, I'm going to double it and double it again. And I'm going to take the Z to 8 as well. And we're going to get that shape. Add that to keyframe. Oh, let me me reset back to the default, which I'm going to call this one. Add keyframe. Where are we at? 11, 12. We're at the default, so let's change the Minger weight over here. Let's just have it and see what we get. It's going to take a little bit to compile. Ooh, look at that. Now that's a shape we would not have thought we would get. So we'll add that to keyframe. Make sure we've got that weight, in our parameters. Let's keep our Minger weight at a half, and let's see what changing the Vixic weight to half. Now you would think that half and half would be the same as 1 and 1, but it's very much not. We get this flowery, bulby, round shape, which we're going to add. So let's leave the Minger weight where it was. Actually, no, let's restore the Minger weight and leave the Vixic weight and add that keyframe. That's an interesting shape. Where are we at? 14. Let's go 15. Vixic weight stays at a half. Okay. Minger sponge scale from 3 to half. Interesting. Minger sponge default. We'll add that keyframe. Then let's see. We need 5 more keyframes. Let's just take 10 again. Add it to the end. So the changes from one shape to another will have a completely different intermediate shape. So even it may look like we're reusing a shape we've reused. It'll really be different because of the transition shapes between them. That's 16. We're going to repeat keyframe 4 over here. We'll add. We're going to repeat keyframe 9. I lost our thumbnail. Sorry. Back up here. 9. Oh, yeah. That's going to be a big transition shape. Let's see. I think I made a mistake. I did 18 too soon. So 18 is actually supposed to be keyframe 6 repeated. So 6, go to 18 and modify. And then we reuse keyframe 9. There we go. And then, of course, we want to go all the way back to where we started, which will add keyframe. There we go. We just did 1:06 of animation, and we've got all of our keyframes configured. Now, we want to go back and play with some of these shapes and colors and lines and fix them a little bit. For example, let's go through here. I can tell 3 right there that's supposed to be the default, but we're going to make it a little bit different. We're going to increase the thickness, say to 2. Yeah, that looks good. And maybe the visibility will double and modify that. That looks pretty good. That could use a little bit more. I'd say about a 2 thickness and another visibility of 2. Intensity of surface we're going to turn down. In fact, intensity of surface was supposed to be at 1/4 all the way across. So here's a chance to look at interpolate keyframes, and I'm going to go all the way to 19 with a value of 0.25. And that takes the light off of the fractal shape, but doesn't seem to change it much. Let's see. Yeah, both of those need the thickness changed. Okay, and we also, oh, look at that. That definitely, you can barely see that. So what are we going to do about that? Well, there's a bunch of things we can do. We'll change the visibility, increase that. We'll increase the thickness to say, yeah, looks like 2 is a better choice. All right. That gets us a nice bright shape. Again, I'm just going to clean up some of these keyframes and make them better. This one keyframe that I keep repeating, if I would have done it better the first time, I wouldn't have had to fix it throughout. That looks pretty good, but thick up the lines a little bit. It looks like that one's going to be just fine where it is. And this one, I think it may be a brand new shape that I didn't have when I ran this test earlier this morning. This is a perfect time to validate this shape real quick. We're going to validate it a couple times because we're going to spin it later, but I'm going to hit it now just to make sure that when we're morphing this shape around, at no time do we smack into the camera. Good. All right. That was easy enough. We didn't. We have all of our shapes together. We've cleaned up most of the lights. Let me just scroll through here. Look for some more lights that might need some attention. Oh, that one definitely does. What do I want to change here? I guess just the thickness. Let me just double the thickness. Yeah, it looks like a combination of doubling thickness and visibility is what I need. I hate changing things multiple times over and over. Relative thickness of lines. Where did that go? See, I have too many parameters now to find anything easily. Oh, and I added thickness later, so it's here irregularly. Let me go all the way to keyframe 20 and line thickness of 2. Oops. See, I should have started with 2. I just did that as a learning experience for you all. Let's try this again. We're going to go to the end on 2 to 2 instead of 1.5 to 2. And that way they're all 2. When we come up here, they should be all brighter. Yeah. Yep. And yep. I want my first and last frame to be the same. Yeah, I'm going to just make this first frame the same as the last frame. Like that. Now, one thing I haven't done is color. I could run a test video with all these morphings and it'd be really cool. But let me just keep at it, pushing on and adding some more parameters. An easy way to add colors throughout without changing every single frame is changing every other frame, leaving it to go from the default whitish blue to another color. So here, these are going to go quickly. I've discovered that the really dark hues work just fine, although now that I've changed it dark, I definitely want to change the line thickness and I definitely want to change the visibility. There we go. That might be even too bright, but it'll work. Let's go with something red. I feel like a strong red, maybe in a dark red. Ooh, we're going to leave that just like it is, dark red. And then we're going to go to this one. I remember that orange earlier was nice. What do we got? Let's try some lime green. That's bright enough. And this one will be the orange one. We're going to go again with the orange. Kind of brighten that up a little bit. That'll work. Actually, I want that one a little bright. Yeah, I want that one bright on the surface. How we doing? Well, we got a few more to go. 12, we'll make any color. Just pick a color, random. Hey, that's our color. Ooh, that's gonna be nice. Oh, there we go. And I feel like a strong purple will work there. Ooh, that's nice. Okay, almost there. Almost there. I don't see any lights at all on this one. I bet you. We might have to, what happens if we pull back on that? Aha, look at that. We've got lights all over the place on that. Oops. What did I just do? Try that again. That'll work. We turn that light thickness down. Nice. This is the only one we've had to move the camera on, and I think we would have been fine, but I kind of want to see those shapes on the outside like that. What else do we need for color? Let's change to dark red again. And this one's definitely going to be a yellow. Oops. Okay, I think we're done here. Last one takes us back to the beginning. Looks like we need to come off the surface. Okay, what shall we do next? We need to do some rotations throughout this entire thing. We rotated that X axis of the traplight shapes. Where is it now? Main fake light X. We did it through 360 all the way across. Well, now we have 20 keyframes, and we want to rotate it, say, 5 times. So a quick math, 5 times 360. We want to go 1,800 times. So we're going to interpolate keyframes by right-clicking on it. Enter 20 as our last keyframe, enter value of 1,800, and it will divide 1,800 across those 20 keyframes. Boom. All right, so we've got the lights rotating across the entire video. We are ready to rotate this entire video. We are pretty much done with Traplights as such. Yay, pat yourself on the back. We have done a lot. If you look at our lights, you can see that we've got different colors and different shapes and different sizes, and a good looking video this will be. But it's a little bit boring in that our shape doesn't move. I did literally one camera move just for this one shape here, and I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll be surprised to see how that turns out. I want to rotate this whole thing. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to go over here to the object frame, object, and instead of the fractal pane on the left side, I want to go global parameters. This time I see an X, Y, and Z axis rotation for the entire fractal. I want to add that to the keyframe animation, clicking on any one of them and adding it will add all 3. And I want to drill down here to the bottom, and I want to rotate this whole entire shape, and I want to rotate it 90 degrees every keyframe. How do I know how much I want to do that? Just trial and error. I actually created 2 sets of videos for my last video where I rotated one 180 degrees per keyframe against a layer rotating 90 degrees per keyframe. We're going to do 90, and we're going to multiply it 90 times 20 to give us 1,800 total. So main fractal rotation X first keyframe 0, our last keyframe. Let's see, right click, interpolate next keyframe, select 20, and give it 1800. And that, boom, will take a while because there's 20 keyframes. There we go. Now this fractal will rotate along the x-axis 90, and we're going to do the same thing for the y-axis. Interpolate next keyframes all the way to 20. The last value is 1800. And we have now completed all of the parameters that need to be set up for, let me give this a refresh. It doesn't look any different. You say, well, that's because we did it 90 degrees at a time. So at each keyframe, it'll look like it's pretty much back at the default location. We're going to delete out all the images that were in that folder. I'm going to run them all, and I'll see you on the other side of rendering all of these frames. And here we go. Well, we'll just watch a little bit of it. You'll see that the shape is rotating. All right, we'll come back in just a minute. And we're back in just a few seconds. I just wanted to show you we're about 387 of 2,000 frames, but we are rotating the entire shape. The colors are changing on the lights. The lights' thickness are changing. Their distance X value is changing. Rotation of that is changing. The fractal itself is morphing of the parameters that we assigned it. It is rotating throughout the entire scene as the lights rotate within it, as the entire thing changes colors. And what we didn't do, we didn't change the light shapes. This is the square throughout, but I wanted to have a nice smooth morphing throughout. Okay, we have about 10 minutes to get through the 2,000 frames, and I'll see you on the other side. So we got about 500 frames into here when I realized that I had forgotten something. The X rotation of the fake lights was set up to run 1800 throughout, but what I forgot that when the Y or the Z goes back to 0 and just the x-axis is spinning, you won't see it with a square because it'll mainly just be spinning along the x-axis. So sometime after these values, we need to go into the y-axis here, interpolate up to 20, and I'm going to add, say, 1500 and let that go through and run. So lesson learned, I should have rotated both the X and the Y. The same way that on the main fractal rotation, I'm rotating both the X and the Y. I should have rotated the orbit lights as well. That's already populated, and I'll keep running, and we'll see now that the lights should be changing both X and the Y axis. There they go. And without that, it'll just spin on one axis and not be near as interesting as it could have been spinning along two axes. All right, I'm going to let that finish out, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, let's take a look and see what we got. I already know that we're going to have to go back and do one correction. I think the shapes are just a little bit too close to the fractal. So let's look at it. We looked at the first 4 frames several times. When we see the morphing of that, it's when we start morphing the shape that things are going to get out of hand. So we'll watch this for the minute or so that it progresses, and then we're going to make some changes. Here we are rounding into 400. Now we start morphing the box, the fractal shape, and we see those lights are changing. And then somewhere around 500, I remembered, hey, I got to there we go. I got to change more than just the x-axis. We got to add the y and z right around in there. So that's one change we'll have to make. We'll morph that from the get-go. I want to pull those lights off the shape just a tiny bit. Not much, but I think I need to add that y-axis back to 2 to pull those off just a little bit. Wow, that's beautiful right there. That came out nice. It came out nicely. Yeah, I want to pull those lights off just a tiny bit. Oh, there's where our weighting gets into that mixture, fluid, hybrid. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. And there we go. We're in the half weight. And then we're back to 1 and 1. There's the shape that we thought would be too close to the camera, so I backed away from it. You can't even tell with the way the camera moved. Nicely done. Oh, those lights are about where I want them. I don't want them any further or closer than that. I may just, yeah, see, now that's a bit close there, but when we start the audio syncing, that'll change. And then because I didn't set my parameters exactly right, there's a tiny little hiccup where we don't have a quite a completely smooth loop. I'm going to call that, though, pretty darn good. I'm going to do a couple of tiny fixes on it, clean it up a little bit, rerun it, and show you one more thing on the other side. Okay, that's finished rendering. I've done some corrections. I put a 2 value here in the orbit trap, Y value all the way across, and I also extrapolated the X and Y rotation all the way through the fractal. And that resulted in this fractal here animation. Let's take a look at this video here. I went ahead and compiled it into a video just to make it a little smoother running. All right. For the first through 4 keyframes. And now we start morphing the shape. Our lights are moving throughout. At no time do they stop. And like last time, I got the color changing every other keyframe. Oh, look at that. And that's the pretty part, and the lights are looking good. Morphing along. Here's the 2 parts where our weight of the formula fractal was half, and then we're back to normal. I should put a light in the very middle of the fractals, considering it's a Minger hybrid. There's lots of holes in it. But we'll save that for part 2 as we get into Traplights. And you know what happened? We did a smooth loop and didn't even notice. So if I take us to the end of that loop, do we see where the loop starts and ends? Oh, there it is. There's a tiny difference in the light. Probably have to do something else to change that. But that is a successful stage 1 Traplight setup. We have 20 keyframes. We have multiple shapes and colors and sizes, and we've morphed the whole thing. We did it in an hour or less. That's all for part 1 of Traplights. I'll see you again for part 2, where we do audio syncing of a wave file with the parameters. Thank you very much. I'm Steve Sink, and I'll see you for part 2 here in just a second. Thanks.
All right, that was Traplighting Mandelbulber part 1. Join me for Audiosyncing part 2, which you'll find in the link down below. And I'm Steve Sink, also known as Pagan Zero. See you at the Facebook site and in the Fractal realms.